Oh god, money sucks. Banks suck. Yesterday, because of how they process things, I had $290. I do not have that. I called them yesterday. I was like, "Hey, you've pulled this trick on me before. Are you gonna pull it again? Are you gonna pull it again?" And they were like, "No, you have that money to spend." Guess what? I woke up to this morning.
Not that money to spend.
No.
The same trick.
I've been duped by capitalism.
Oh no. I came here not expecting to be robbed blind by this convention. I got so many good things, but...
I made this Friday entirely. I learned halfway through the importance of using tape to make straight lines. Because the top lines aren't straight.
That's a little important.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Oh, just a little bit, yeah.
Alright. Feel free to come closer, guys. You know, we got a smaller crowd, so we can be more conversational if we want. I am Phelan. This is D&D Gets CyberPUNK'd.
I'll move up.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Come on in. Come on in. Just getting started.
Come on in, trickle in. Join the family, get closer.
Exactly.
The closer you are, the easier it'll be to feed on you.
I'll participate with.
Exactly. So I am Phelan. This is Teb.
I'm Cedric.
And Cedric. I have been DMing primarily D&D for like 11 years, and I've dabbled in other games. You've got some speckled background.
I have a speckled background. I have done a lot of different systems. I've done a lot of Shadowrun. Started Shadowrun 3. Craziest sci-fi-ish one that I've done is Mechanical Dreams. It's been fun.
I've been DMing since I was 14. Unfortunately, I'm a baby, so that doesn't mean anything. That's less than 10, I'd say close to 8 years.
That's still pretty good.
8 years experience.
And yeah, any particular, what's your spread of systems?
Mostly Shadowrun. I did Starfinder for 2 years straight, and I have many things to say about Starfinder, and by extension Pathfinder and 3.5. I dabble a little bit in Shadowrun, and I'm starting Savage Worlds soon. I'm still reading through that rulebook.
Very good. So the point, my idea for the panel, and like I said, we got a small audience, we can be chatty about it, and actually we might, now that we're getting started, go ahead and snooze this. There we go. So, kind of the premise here is, you know, D&D is one of the more popular games that's getting its big renaissance. You know, people are very culturally aware of it. But classical D&D and, you know, your fantasy setting is not necessarily what everyone is after. So there's lots of ways that you can play cyberpunk stuff. Whether it's adapting D&D, dabbling into some of these other games that we've mentioned, there's lots of fun ways to do it. So I can talk about, especially reskinning Dungeons & Dragons exactly as it is. Is there anyone here who is at Charity D&D this morning?
Oh,
Yeah. All right, so all of those characters were reskinned classic 5th edition D&D stuff. So you can get very creative in really looking at what your mechanics of classes are and just change the names, change the aesthetic of what's going on. So, in terms of really easy reskinning, we've got Grunt, who was the street samurai. A very classic Shadowrun idea of a street warrior. Well, you're both Shadowrun folks. Talk about street samurais.
Street Samurai is a character that is primarily in the cyberpunk realm, a person who has taken physical means to deal more damage, typically physically. And if that means augmenting yourself with better and more advanced electronic artificial parts, then by all means that's in play.
You know that scene in Endgame, I believe, where Hawkeye is briefly an assassin in Tokyo for some reason? That's a street samurai. The Ronin thing was poorly explained. You don't need to worry about it. But also, there's some good resources to look at if you play D&D. Starfinder has a pretty decent augment system that can be translated over fairly well. You just have to modify around some of the numbers because of the wonders of bounded accuracy.
And we will get to other systems and tweaking your systems and inspiration as another idea. But here's like your level 1, the easiest stuff to do. Okay, Street Samurai, they fight with weapons, they augment themselves to be better. Sounds kind of like a classic fighter, if you're thinking in D&D terms, which is exactly what Grunt was. Went through. So also, actually, show of hands. How many people are familiar with 5th edition D&D? Okay, but at least the concept. Okay. Do you have any particular RPG experience, or
I'm kind of starting to dabble in it. I've only done one shot so far.
Okay, all right. What was the system?
I don't know what it was.
It was 5.
Oh, it was 5. Okay, perfect. So we got everyone here is on a pretty similar baseline to a certain extent. So yeah, your classic fighter. They're a martial fighter that focuses on their physical abilities and ways to augment their abilities. So you just kind of go through, look at that class feature, all those class features, and see what you can reskin. So Grunt, he's got his AI suit. He's all augmented with these various things. So I went ahead and made him a bugbear, because they have a 10-foot melee reach.
Oh.
He's not literally a bugbear, but it's easy to be like, oh, he's got, extenda arms, or, longer arms, because they're, cybernetic and whatnot. So he's got a 10-foot reach. Same thing. He's wearing mech armor with, hydraulics and stuff. The bugbears have a powerful build that allows them to lift and push more weight. There you go. Then I actually used the fighter subclass of the samurai. Easy pickings. They have a whole thing of, doing... Or no, sorry, that's still a bugbear trait. Bugbears... Sorry. Bugbears have, extra damage on surprise attacks. So I was like, there we go. He's ambush, street fighter. Then when we get into the actual fighter stuff, you've got their second wind. Very straightforward. You don't even have to rename that. It just, they're good at fighting. They can kind of catch their breath and get going. And then the samurai has that ability. It's a bonus action. They can gain some temp HP. And I just kind of combined that with the fighter's action surge ability and made just an adrenaline shot. Ooh. Also, for the purposes of a stage show, a lot of these things are simplified and combined. But you can kind of see how you can take a character and just reflavor the existing mechanics, and it works perfectly fine. Same thing with Quent, the social media influencer. Any guesses on how I made a social media influencer?
Bard.
Exactly. Go through and look at the Bard. It's all there. They have the performative skills. They have the raw magnetism. They've got, the magic of the class can be reflavored in other ways of their supernatural allure. These cyberpunk settings can have different types of magic and things like that. So, you've got your bardic inspiration. That's perfectly straightforward right as it is. Like, I've got all these subscribers. Here, let me send some subscribers your way. Smash that subscribe button is what I called it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. I made mechanically, I made this particular character because I wanted him to be very magnetic and have this, this almost superior quality. I went ahead and made him a half-elf. You got the charisma and 2 abilities of your choice. I said a skeptical celebrity. He's got advantage on saving throws against being charmed. There's the Fey ancestry. You just kind of flavor it to give that same sort of thing. The Song of Rest that gives additional healing when they take a short rest. That's Vine and Dine. We're looking at funny videos and having snacks.
Fantastic.
That's the greatest short rest of all time.
It's great. It's great.
7-second short rest.
And then, of course, if we're delving further into the class, I went with the subclass of a glamour bard that is all about performance and entrancement and look at me, and perfectly translates over. So I really didn't have to change anything to do Quent. I just renamed things. The only thing that I had to do slightly differently with Quent was I went ahead and changed up the names of spells and the concept of how the spells were working.
Wait, hold on. Are you going to really skip over X Shadow Slicer?
Oh, we're getting there.
Okay.
Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Perfect.
Let's see. Where the hell did I... Yeah, so for Quent spells, I changed up the spells a little bit and made it, punchy and funny, even though it's not typically on their spell list. I gave them Bless and called it #blessed. The command spell instead becomes #challenge. Tasha's hideous laughter becomes #raffle, rolling on the floor laughing. We have disguise self. I woke up like this. Let's see. Read thoughts. We're in a cyberpunk setting. It becomes a wiretap. And then, my personal favorite, Zone of Truth becomes #NoFilter.
Powerful.
So there you go, with minor tweaks to what spells the class is allowed to have and creative renaming and just saying it's their raw magnetism, it doesn't even strictly have to be magic, you've got yourself a cyberpunk class without really doing too much work. Any thoughts or questions on that stuff? Any chime-in points?
Not a point. I was just going to transition from there.
Yeah.
But first, if anyone has any questions or stuff. I think I really like what Phelan does it is Phelan.
Yeah,
right?
Phelan.
Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure I was pronouncing that right. Phelan here is talking about the mechanical side of reflavoring, and that is very good. Myself, I do a lot more of the storytelling reflavoring. Because I don't know rules and I count on my players to memorize all of this stuff. My players actually play with more. We have minor tweak based on setting stuff. Like we had to change the whole Archfey thing because they're weird time worms instead. That's a separate detail. But the thing is, when you're creating D&D 5 inherently is built at the base to be... its origins are in a combat game, and as a result, a lot of its features are more combat exclusive. When you move into future eras, the so-called the world, the society, the kind of encounters you encounter change. So it's important as a DM to balance around that, to see that maybe the fighter, you could change the context of the encounters. No longer is it random encounters in the forest. Rather, maybe you're getting mugged in a major city, or instead of bandit camps, it's, and I hate using the example of an office shootout, but we've had like 3 this past month in our game. But suddenly you want to look at the world that you have and reflavor traditional archetypes in a different manner. No longer, the opening quest of Here Be Goblins is there's a cart of goblins and it's going to that village. That, while it is a fantasy setup, the setup itself is not, it can be revised. You have a cart and you have a destination. Maybe it's people doing an illegal arms trade and you have to stop them from getting to the town and supplying a major gang. Maybe it's an anarchist group trying to blow up a public building and you're trying to stop this encounter. Fundamentally, you're taking the structure that already exists and recontextualizing it. And by doing this, you can create different applications of different scenarios. No longer does it have to be, now the fighter, instead of just being a marshal, has to figure out physical placement, zoning, cover. All of these things suddenly change because the context of the adventure has suddenly changed. I think that's one of the most important things that a GM needs to do when they change the genre of the setting, is recontextualizing basic D&D encounters into something new. That was something, I met one of Matt Mercer's writers, Rick Hines, a while back, and that was something he said. He talked about the opening encounter of Here Be Goblins can be rewritten. It's very simple. There are some goblins, there's a town. When written as a vanilla module, it's just, oh no, we gotta stop the goblins. But let's add in some stakes. Let's put them in a cart. Let's put some innocent villagers who don't know that there's a goblin coming over there. So already you have an element of urgency. the consequences being presented, and then you add in an extra element of danger. There's dynamite on the card. The goblins are going to go blow up the town. And if you change the flavor of that, you recontextualize the scenario into something new, and your players will not know. The better half of it.
I am kind of piggybacking on that. I'm kind of curious to know how many folks do we have here who are game runners and interested in that sort of stuff versus people who are game runners, DMs.
2.
We got 2, and then other folks are more interested in the playing side of things, or somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So yeah, keep that aspect in mind.
Yeah.
So you've got reflavoring both a dungeon master in their setting as well as players when you are considering a character that you want to build. You can lean on these fantasy archetypes and be like, all right, well, what does that look like in this new setting? What's my springboard to jump into the cyberpunk setting?
Out of curiosity, as far as, especially when you were creating some of these characters and when you've been kind of building some of the genres, altered genres, like when I have done different genres, I've actually just kind of picked Shadowrun and kind of read the books and went for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of resources would you have used, especially for this morning's thing, as far as like how to adapt an existing system into a new genre?
So on this particular exercise, my inspiration was I have run for these particular players a couple of times, and I know their ideals and their archetypes and what they play well. So I'm like, okay, Dragor, likes to be quippy and quick, and he's in tune with the social media sphere. So I'm like, all right, social media influencer. Also, I've had in the back of my head a long time the idea of like a fantasy era bard who says stuff like #blessed. And I was like, well, now I have an excuse to do it.
You do have a history of doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was like, this is the perfect opportunity, and John likes to play simple, straightforward, punch it. So I'm like, well, he's going to be a street samurai. So especially because I'm creating the character for someone. So you as players, if you are considering what sort of archetype you want to play in a new genre, think about your play style and the types of stuff that you enjoy doing.
Especially if you're crafting a one-shot.
Yeah, especially for a one-shot, because you're gonna you've got a limited amount of time with that character. You want to be sure that their whole shtick is something that you enjoy.
Yes.
It kind of goes with the character making. Is it okay to kind of use like different classes to kind of build that character?
Absolutely.
Trying to make like a spy, and so I was trying to go with like a bard, rogue, warlock.
Yeah.
And the only reason why warlock is because it uses charisma too, and kind of makes me kind of like, oh, I can still do stuff from afar or close up. And
oh, absolutely, yeah. So and that's a little bit what I did with X Shadow Slicer 79X, the kid hacker.
You were one number off.
That was on purpose.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. So this one was something where I started from the baseline of a rogue and tweaked some of the class abilities to figure out where we go from there. Because it's like, all right, he's a hacker kid, hacker genius, give the high intelligence and whatnot. So I started pretty much straightforward and very, vanilla. I actually made him a rock gnome because he's a kid. They have the rocky camouflage of they get advantage to stealth in rocky terrain. I just made it he has advantage to stealth in crowds and public places because people don't pay attention to kids.
Oh. Wow.
That sort of stuff. And he's a brilliant, he's a kid, genius. They have the advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. Boom, there we go. Then for the class itself, starting with rogue, it makes sense. They've got all those skill proficiencies. Thieves' tools can easily translate to your hacker deck or what have you. Sneak attack.
Into the main.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in. Exactly. But then here's where I went off kind of on the tangent and tweaking things is, so you've got a hacker who engages in, the invisible ether of the technological world around them. They can do things from a distance. What's one of the classic thief or rogue archetypes that does things from a distance. The arcane trickster that can cast an invisible mage hand and do their thieves' tools remotely.
So no one should use illusionist, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
My arcane trickster in our party, her flavor is specific. This is a wide magic setting that I'm running, and her flavor is that she's physically incapable of casting magic because she's missing parts of her brain and body. So she instead everything is a practical spell, like stage magician style. The trade-off for there's advantages. For example, dispel magic does not work on her, but on the same time, she has to physically go and set everything up, and she can only pick spells that are physically possible. I require an explanation for every spell that she does, and
Exactly. Yeah.
to widen that point, find the archetype of the character you want to play first, and I said this before at the GMing 101 panel, but I think it's important for everyone in RPGs to hear. You have to look at the world with both a critical and a creative eye. Find ideas and ask yourself, how can I apply them?
Exactly.
And also a quick note on the note of official resources. Dark Matter is a recently released high science fiction D&D 5 module. It is $29.99 digital and $39.99 hardcover.
Awesome.
It has space battle rules. It's got vehicle rules. It has custom backgrounds for all the races, not all the races, custom backgrounds for classes, new archetypes, new races that can be adapted into other settings. Very good book, highly recommend it. Other than that, there are semi-official conversions of other systems. I know for a fact that there's an official conversion between all the finders to D&D. It's not perfect, but Wizards made it themselves, fully knowing this.
Yeah. Another resource that I have tickled on in the past, and it's a great jumping off point, is the Unearthed Arcana articles that Wizards of the Coast puts out with D&D. In particular, there is one that is modern magic, I think they called it, or
It's
city
just
magic.
released, and it's so good.
Did they do a new one?
Yeah, they
Oh, okay. So there was one that came out like 2 years ago, and that's kind of been my reference point. So if they've refreshed it, that's good.
it's
to know.
out of Unearthed Arcana, I think, is what I've heard.
Oh.
It's out of Hue, and it's officially like they're going to shove it into a book at some point.
Oh, okay. I see. But we haven't seen it since the Unearthed Arcana.
No, I think they posted it.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, Unearthed Arcana articles in general and other things that Wizards of the Coast posts are really handy resources for you to look at. And again, look at it from that agnostic lens of like, okay, here's what this new subclass does and how I can adapt it. But yeah, that city one in particular, it had a city domain cleric, it had a technomancer wizard, it had one or two other things that were, really handy inspiration points. They had new spells. So you can always take that sort of stuff and use that as a resource for your reflavoring. And when you're looking at that sort of stuff, you can tweak and change like I did with this. So it's like, you've got the arcane trickster that is doing things from afar. So instead I just went ahead and made his mage hand a little floating construct that can cloak itself and go around and do stuff invisibly. And I then tied his sneak attack to it as malware. So instead of like, you need advantage or you need to have an ally, I was just like, as long as an enemy is next to Neo, he can send malware onto them.
Neo. Nice.
Yes, it stands for, let's see, stands for, where the heck is it? Whoops, nope, that is the wrong.
You have some very beautiful character sheets.
Thank you. Yeah, we can actually go over that if anyone's interested. Nano-electric observer.
Ooh.
So yeah, as long as an enemy is next to your little construct, they can infect the target with malware, and that's where your sneak attack comes from.
There's also a quick thing that, as of everything that Phelan has mentioned, if you guys have caught on, he's playing, I'm assuming, a setting without magic?
Kind of. So I leaned kind of on Teb directly for some inspiration, because he's my Shadowrun expert, my Shadowrun buddy, of the concept of like the classic Shadowrun setting typically has, obviously all of your technological stuff, but then they've got some psychics, some magic-y spirits sort of thing.
It's really fringe science in the universe of Shadowrun.
Right.
They even have magic studies in MIT.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, for this for the hacker kid, yes, it is all technical. There is a logical, straightforward explanation. For the social media influencer, it was kind of on that line of like a lot of it is coming from like corporate sponsorships and just the fact that people are watching you and your raw magnetism. There's a little bit of flavor there of there's something special about you. There's a spirit that kind of clings around you. But then I did also take a luck bender was the fourth character, which was a trickery domain cleric, basically. And did some slight tweaks of how that works. And that was very explicitly like, this is magic. Lady Luck is literally like with him. And the spirit changes probability around him at his request.
And whereas I've kept the spells mostly the same and let the players instead use the applications different in a modern setting. So it really depends on what kind of game you're running, and that changes what gets flavored, how it gets flavored, and why it is flavored this way.
Exactly.
If I were to actually go about doing this, I would imagine it probably has a lot to do with the style of GM that one finds themselves to be. Like, I imagine if you're taking the rule sets as inspiration, they can probably just start altering and piecemealing things together. And also kind of the kinds of players that you have, especially if they're more experienced, and start like jamming out with them to find out what you can do. That alone I could see being really fun to do.
Especially with, if you're in this situation of using D&D 5th edition, but trying to do an alternate setting, there's very much a collaborative meeting of the minds coming to the middle between dungeon master and player in order to figure out, okay, here's the character, here's how I envision my character working, and the DM saying, here's how I envision the world working. Where do those two things intersect?
I thought for a second you were going to say a meeting between dungeon and dragon. That's what my mind auto-filled, and that was perfect.
Yeah. So, again, to that concept of, there's no magic, the spells for this hacker kid, also on all of these character sheets, I called them tricks. I didn't call them spells. So he's got minor illusion, straightforward. I didn't even have to change the name. A spell called Circuit Sweep, where instead of detect magic, he's detecting the circuitry in the systems. An alarm spell. Don't have to change that. It works exactly. It's just, instead of some silver thread, he's literally rigging up, a tripwire or a surveillance camera that will alert him when it's triggered. And then major illusion, major image, just becomes a hologram. He's got to put out a little, have Neo project an image for him, and it works all the same way.
It's that self-consistent flavor that really builds your world.
So that's how I work in the confines of D&D, if that's where your jumping point you want to work off from. Of course, D&D is far from the only game out there. So let's have our Shadowrun experts dive in and maybe talk about just like how Shadowrun works to a high level.
So I've been playing Shadowrun since 2002-ish, off and on. And there are a series of editions of Shadowrun just like D&D. And what's interesting about the different editions of Shadowrun is they have taken the perspective of history, because Shadowrun takes place in a future world of our planet. And
where magic reapparated one day. And
insanity and cats and dogs and etc.
The president is a dragon. Yeah.
Yes. Effective president. It was very fascinating history on that stuff.
Yeah.
And let's see, the people start turning into trolls and orcs. And
yes.
people start getting born as elves and dwarves.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden you start having long lost societies start to regain magic. So then you have Native Americans who are starting to like uprise and take back land.
Tirnanog just shows up in Ireland,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to double check that information.
Water for you if you want it.
Thank you. Then, like on a page on a cover of Shadowrun is like literally like North American map. Everything has now changed, and not only do you have all the magic and all the like different races that appear, you also have a lot of lore about like how did we deal with all this change, and how did the corporations come about, and what led to the corporate structure that has arisen. What are people's tasks within these corporations? So you have a lot of like corporate drones, office workers, and then you also have, of course, the Shadowrunners. And the Shadowrunners are typically who players play as, and they're the
Errand
the wet
boys.
work, effectively. Anywhere from like fetch a coffee in like some remote location that's dangerous to fetch me like the corporate like
The access
research.
codes for the rival, corporation.
It's troubling how many Shadowrun games begin in a shootout at a gas station.
Mine started out in a grocery store.
that
You know
was
what?
getting bombed.
That yes.
Yeah, like I said, very troubling the amount of time.
So instead of rats in basements, you have shootouts at
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the environment there then allows us to start to think of places that we go to quite often. Where would they be 20 to 30 years from now, a heavily corporate, high technology with magic environment?
I also just want to point out that the thesis of Shadowrun is magic has reapparated, so we made it into late stage capitalism.
Yes.
I just want everyone to be on the same page about that.
And one of the campaigns that I'm actually playing right now, I have the GM there is a doctorate in anthropology. Dear Lord, that's a dangerous situation.
No.
And I live in Chicago, and there is some material out there to play in Chicago. Then he went and started making maps, and like how does the train system survive? And it really allows you to take a local area and then make it something.
Oh yeah, steal. If GMs steal.
Yes, absolutely.
Why make a subway map when you could just go steal the subway map of Montreal?
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. Very handy. Mechanically,
So
Shadowrun is a D6 pool, multiple D6 games.
Yes.
What's interesting about the approach of Shadowrun is especially you have archetypes. So you have characters you can consider structuring a character as, but they don't have classes. So you can like piecemeal and mix and match all these different Alucard type things together to make a character.
Build a
that
bear
fits-
class shop.
Yep.
Effectively, yes.
The Suikoden system.
And the dice pool system also is pretty intriguing.
I started with 5, and then when they released 6, they changed the dice pool system. I beta tested it at Gen Con,
Yes.
and it is nothing like how it is in 5.
For anyone
Yes.
who might not be familiar with the concept, by the way,
Yeah.
the way that the system works is as you buy ranks or skills or proficiency in the various aspects of what you want your character to do, you get more D6s to roll.
And a 5 and a 6 counts as a success, and everything 4 and below is a failure. So you just roll that many amount of d6s, count the successes, match it against the opponent usually, or the difficulty check of the opposing roll, and see what ensues.
So you don't have it's not like, oh, I roll a d20 plus 3 for perception. It's just how many d6s can I roll
You get a
to try
giant
and get
cube of
successes.
D6s.
It's like Warhammer.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. It's very much Build-A-Bear class.
The other interesting thing of Shadowrun throughout even the last 20 years is every edition has pretty massively changed like how that die pool system worked. Shadowrun 3 was pretty complicated at Shadowrun 4. Simplified things we looked at Shadowrun 5 and stayed with 4.
5, I will say, I would recommend 5, but only if you go... 5 is simultaneously more beginner-friendly and also worse in every aspect than 4. It's because of some changes that they made to the Decker archetype, which is the hacker people. They gave them a set... They thought that, hey, Deckers don't get to do a lot except sit there and hack. So they gave them an entirely separate minigame. Whenever you hack something, it goes into a sub-game where only the Decker gets to play the game. And it's really awful, because to get one success takes about 30 minutes, and you need usually anywhere between 4 to 9 to pass the hacking check. So if you can get into Shadowrun 5, because that's the current edition that a lot of people are still on, find a modified version. There's a lot of rules online that simplify the hacking down, because otherwise the classes are still very well built, the rules are relatively well explained, and unlike 6, the game is finished.
There is that too, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does that kind of cover any questions on Shadowrun or thoughts or anything to add?
If you're interested, by the way, in the Shadowrun setting, but you don't want to play the game, half of every rule book, approximately, is just lore and world building.
And yeah, so that is another thing. Like I'm saying, you know, I steal from Unearthed Arcana. I take inspiration from Shadowrun. Whatever system you're playing, go cherry pick from other games, other settings, and see things that you can cobble together that are fun for you as a dungeon master or as inspiration for your player character concept.
See the genre you want? Steal it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And a handy tool for doing exactly that is another system that I absolutely love, and I will definitely be running. Teb, by the way, is one of my home game players, and definitely am going to be running this at some point, is a system called Open Legend. That is a classless, setting-agnostic rule set. And, as the name might imply, it is also available completely free, open source, online, so you can check it out for free. Obviously, you can buy a physical rule book if you want, and you get really into it, but it's all there on the website.
The website also has an auto character creator, doesn't it?
I think it's got some sort of creation tool, maybe. It's been a long time since I've looked at the website, because I have 2 hardcovers of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think they added it, because we played a game in that very recently.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. So the way that Open Legend works is everything is about what they call attribute scores. So you're familiar with D&D, you know, you've got your strength, your dexterity, constitution. They have that even more expanded, and everything in the game is based off of those attributes, basically. So you've got, you know, like 4 physical attributes, you've got 4 mental attributes, and I think like 3 social attributes.
It's been a while since I checked, but
Yeah.
it sounds about right.
So you've got, you know, you've got like your, you know, your strength and your dexterity and your constitution and what have you. You've got various aspects of your mentality, and you've got your social skills. And then there's a whole, and all of those people will use no matter what. Even if you have a 0, you can use that skill because it's part of being a person, essentially. Then they've got a whole block of what they call extraordinary attributes that deal with special powers. They could be, you know, depending on the setting, it could be magic, it could be tech, it could be whatever fits into your setting. So these attributes are things like energy, that deals with, you know, fire and ice and lightning and that sort of thing. Or entropy, which deals with like your necromancy or your necrosis and that sort of stuff. Chaos damage or what have you.
Casting Decay on someone is very fun.
Oh, yeah. And so that leads into the next part of things. The bulk of your cool abilities are Banes and Boons. And also the Banes and Boons are also agnostic. So the blinded Bane can come from any number of attributes. It could be you're a fighter and you just threw sand in their eyes. Or you're a necromancer and you rotted their eyeballs. Or you're a technomancer and you hacked their implant and now it's not sending the feed. So it's totally agnostic, and every single Bane or Boon has has various attributes that are associated with it, the things that are legal. And also your dungeon master can not on the fly, but in your character creation say, yeah, this Bane makes sense for your power source. It's very flexible like that. And the gameplay is, as I was mentioning, you've got all these attributes, you have a score, it's a dice pool game. So for everything, you always roll a d20, but then as your skill goes up in certain attributes, you also add other dice. So you add a d4 or you add a d6, so on and so forth. And they all explode as well.
So when you roll the top number, you roll again.
You roll again and add them together. And so when you're trying to do a skill, for example, you just want to get over the DC. If you're doing, this is the one thing I love, if you're just doing like a damaging attack, like I shoot him with a gun, or, I set him on fire, it's just you roll the relevant attribute, and however much you exceed their defense, that's how much damage you did.
That's easy.
Yes, set someone on fire for 300 damage.
Ooh. So that is a game system that I strongly recommend people check out because it's intentionally flexible. It's all available for free, so it's easy for you to dabble your fingers into and see if it works for you.
A parallel system to this, a system I'm still learning, is Savage World, which has a very similar attributes system, but it also has a skill list, so it's a little bit closer to D&D. Attributes are typically used for combat and the raw innate abilities of your character. They're also like Open Legends, and I think this is where Open Legends might have gotten some of its inspiration, because I know for a fact that Savage World is older. Its damage is just how much you are over their defense, but the Savage World has a separate skill list, and the main thing is that all attributes and skills level up according to dice. You go from a D4 to a D6 to a D8 to a D12, and then after that it's just linear numbers. So D12 plus 1, D12 plus 2, etc. And what's cool about that system is that it is a system that is built, not only is it setting agnostic, it has a lot of rules that can be sidestepped, but the fact that they're there creates a lot of possibilities. Specifically, it is a setting where combat is quick and deadly. You have bennies, that's what they're called. They're like inspiration in D&D, where you can use it to re-roll a roll. Or my favorite use of them, make someone else re-roll a roll. It is as amazing as you think it is. Initiative is dealt in terms of cards. You take a deck of cards, and you shuffle a card to everyone. And it's just biggest number with ace first, going after one another. And the suits have different order of which one is over which one. And my favorite, if you play a joker, because you keep the jokers in the deck, you can interrupt a turn at any moment, including the GMs. The combat is meant to be cinematic fighting, so there's cover rules, movement rules, variable initiative rules with the cards, all sorts of stuff. I would recommend it, but I think as your first system, and that might not be the best idea because it is a little obtuse. If you are playing Savage World, you want someone to kind of explain it to you. Because also, for the special abilities, it has a power point system. It is much like the spell point system in D&D 5. And if you have not heard of what the spell point system is exactly, imagine a mana bar from video games. That the problem is the power points, from what I understand, as far as I've read the rules, can be really subjective. So power scaling is not always linear, and that's where I think one of its pitfalls lie is that they give you parameters for what each tier of power is supposed to do, but the parameters are still worded in a somewhat ambiguous way. So again, if you are going to try it, I recommend having someone else teach it to you, because I'm learning it on my own and it's awful.
Now, what's the character creation like and level of growth in?
I can't believe I forgot to mention my favorite thing about that system.
Well, I also forgot about Open Legends, so that's part of why I'm asking.
Yeah, the best thing about that in character creation is it has a whole list of creating your own custom races, of giving them special abilities, and it has one of my favorite features, edges and hindrances. Edges are cool things that give your character benefit. Hindrances are things that give your characters negatives. Do you have one eye? You get a minus D4, it's a minus D8 to all perception checks. Do you have a lame leg? You only have half movement, that sort of thing. But for every hindrance, you get a counterbalanced number of edges. So you get to actively create a dynamic character that has that that variability and also personality. But leveling up is very simple. Per encounter, you get, not per encounter, at certain rates, you get a skill point. I don't remember the rate exactly, it's not an XP bar. But you get a single skill point that you get to assign to either an attribute or a skill. Every attribute that you start with is at a +1. Every attribute after the fact that you don't start with is at a +2. So it's a very simple, just assign numbers where they are placed.
Yeah, actually very similar with Open Legend. You don't have, like I said, you don't have classes. You build your character as you wish because it's all setting agnostic. There are no races. You have perks and flaws of, positive traits about your character and negative traits about your character that are more about it could be a racial thing of like, oh, you're a goblin thing that you can see in the dark or whatever. A lot of them are personal, like I know someone who's important. I have the ear of the king, and so once a session, I can just make something socially happen. That sort of thing.
I know a guy.
Right, I know a guy. I use that for this as well. Sort of. And for growth, similarly, you get like a point, and you put that into your character by increasing those attributes to make your dice better, and also especially for the banes and boons, there's a limit of like there are like power level 9 boons. You need to have an attribute of 9 in order to even do those.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing, and buying feats to customize your character a little bit further and stuff like that. So you also don't. It's not like the D&D of like, ding, we hit level 4, now we suddenly got better. Every single session you play is the idea. Mm-hmm. Your character gets a little bit better at one particular thing, so it's that more organic growth curve of your character that feels more natural and more explainable. Of like, well, I used my fire spells a lot, so I'm going to get stronger in my energy score, that sort of thing.
With the Shadowrun leveling system, since there's actually no levels in Shadowrun, effectively what you actually have is a build on the Alucard system, and every so often the GM is able to give out what are called karma points. You do certain things, you get certain points. And certain spells may cost like 1 or 2 karma points to increase an ability score, might cost more. And so you just bank up these points, and then you just invest in what you think the character direction would go. Typically when I have actually GM'd Shadowrun, I've also kind of required that a player justifies an actual in-game reason why they're actually getting better in something. So, like, if they want to like put karma points into strength and they've done nothing physically, I'm going to challenge that. But I mean, that's kind of my GM flair as far as that kind of thing goes. But it's a very interesting way of approaching that, especially since there's no levels or classes in Shadowrun. But the other fun part that you're also able to invest in is the I know a guy type of thing.
Yep.
So
I know a guy.
So you have what are called contacts. And in Shadowrun, if you want to be able to, and especially if you're like a ground level street samurai and you have now stolen stuff and you want to get money for it, you got to know a guy. So now you can, if you have a contact, a fencer, and if he's only like a level 1 contact, he might be like, that's way too much, I ain't touching that. But if like you've known this guy for decades and you go way back, then he's probably like more of a 3 or level 4 contact. He's like, I don't want to do this, but for you I will. And so you get to invest in those kind of things on like how your character interacts and has invested in the world.
The benefit of Shadowrun having a lot of rules is that paradoxically it gives you a great amount of freedom, because as Tab just said, that contacts mechanic is, there's no ambiguous thing like in D&D sometimes with character backstories like, did I know this guy for 10 years or did you meet him last year? everything is quantifiable. So Shadowrun's entry level skill is a little high, but after that the game, I wouldn't want to say that it plays itself, but it plays in a surprisingly fluid manner because everything is accounted for.
Speaking of fencing, there is a nifty mechanic in Open Legend, actually, where you don't track money. You track your specific possessions if you need to, and things that are pertinent, whatever your dungeon master deems pertinent. But you just have a wealth level. And that is like, it's kind of assumed like you spend X money and X money is coming in that you sustain this particular level of like, you're in poverty, or, you are comfortable, or you are a wealthy aristocrat,
Silver Gato Man, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gato Man, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gato Man, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.